You want to go ahead and delve into the bombshell you were talking about
Well,
earlier?
yeah, let's see. How can we introduce this? With election integrity has been kind of like a murder mystery. If you've watched those, typically three things get basically established. You have the means, what how they did it, the opportunity, and then there's the motive. The motive is really the key thing. And the one thing that bugged me when we just went through the 2024 election is when I was watching all those down ballot races, it was like building in my head. If you want to use the same analogy, like 2020 happened, it was kind of like a missing person. And we were like, what just happened here? We went and investigated with the little bit of digital data that we had from that 2020 election, and we found a body. And we're like, well, who did it? That's where this all started. And then the next election happened, another body comes up, and we're like, we got a serial killer on our hands. So everybody's sitting there and everybody's got theories. Everybody's got a list of subjects. People have said, is it China hacking us? Are the vendors stealing the elections and the supervisor elections don't know anything? Are the supervisor elections in on it? Is the state in on it? There's all these theories, right? But what happens when you establish motive is usually it's like, whoa, this just jumps out. It's the butler with the candlestick in the living room because he has all three of those things. So recently we heard this guy in Texas that he was laying out a case with property taxes in Texas, and he explained this scenario where he's a builder, he comes in and they're trying to hike up his property taxes, something a lot of us are dealing with, especially in Florida with insurance and all this other stuff. But the thing that was very odd is he's a businessman and he came in there with all his documentation ready to show like what's the valuation of this. And the property appraiser is acting kind of like a used car salesman and saying, hold on a second, let me go in the back and see if I can get that approved. And it's just like, this doesn't make sense. There's laws for this. There's math. Like, why is this happening? Long story short, he sued them and he discovered when they admitted under oath that they pulled 60,000 properties out of Denton, Texas and put them in a spreadsheet and just figured out how much money they needed to raise and just applied it to those houses. So that is like completely breaking the law. And Texas has it a lot worse than us, but it's very similar. We have an increasing problem in Florida with property taxes. The reason they were manipulating the property tax rolls is because the school boards were essentially over leveraged, meaning they borrowed too much money. So essentially, they collateralized everybody's house because they went to the banks and said, hey, look, we got all these people. They're captive prisoners. If they don't pay the property tax, we take their house from them. So, of course, they're going to get loans. A normal person would maybe borrow 20% of what they needed. No, no. They borrowed 20 times what they needed. So for every dollar of taxpayer money they had, they borrowed 20 and they leveraged it to the hilt. So when I sat back and I heard that and I saw that it was connected to the school board and the guy is explaining how the school boards are refusing to give Ken Paxton all the financials to be audited, I don't think we're worried about gay kids in school anymore or what bathrooms we need to do. That's all a diversion. We need to start asking the schools, show us your damn financial sheets because we got issues here. And the thing is that if they don't show us these financials, that is even further proof that they need to essentially keep this under wraps. After seeing what I've seen, they are purposely controlling the elections because any normal human being, like a normal citizen, would come in and look down at the paperwork and go, what the hell? And just freak out because they would see all the financial fraud that's going on. They only can let people in to these school board races, property appraisal, legislators, governors that are on board to conceal this away from the people. That's the only way that they could basically do this. So again, going back to the murder mystery, that's your motive. They want to cover up for all the financial fraud that they've done by leveraging everybody's property taxes to the hilt. They're most likely going to blow this all up because this goes back to that you'll own nothing and be happy situation. I was thinking they were going to do this to the stock market, but now everybody's house will be in hell because you'll get bills that be like, what's this? And my property taxes have gone up 300, 500%. And you'll be in a situation where it's like, well, if you don't like it, move. And you will literally lose your house and it will be forced like the Depression. Like if you go back to the 20s and you see all those farmers, it always bugged me because I sat back and thought to myself, I was like, how did farmers lose their houses during the Depression if there was no property taxes? Who repossessed these farms? And they were passing these things to their kids for generations. And all of a sudden in 1920, they lost their farm. But this is essentially a hijack. This is the government colluding with the banks to steal people's property. I don't know how else to sugarcoat it. This is the motive. This is essentially why they're rigging elections.
So Texas doesn't have what we have in Florida, which is the 3% of your property value, right? Or assessed value.
That law says you can't increase. The reason I keep in on this, and it was just almost fate, I'm sitting there talking to my neighbor, and she's talking about how her dad wanted to buy a house because he was downsizing and he was looking at a house maybe 10 minutes away from my house. And she said that they had to back out of the real estate deal because the taxes were $16,000 a year. And I'm like, what? That's Jersey rates. They're doing it to new houses. They're super inflating the new house fees. Literally, our houses have gone up double within the last 5 years. We're all like, yay, we're making money. But we don't realize that that's also affecting the assessed values of all these houses being sold.
Well, what they did in our county is they did it through impact fees, and our school district did that. And
Any
they
which
convinced
way.
the voters to tax themselves, and they used the teachers not being paid enough. They did a huge propaganda, and we fought against it.
Some counties will be better than others. But when I was looking into this, Miami, Broward, Orange County, Hillsborough, those are the big ones. Palm Beach, I think, is in there too. They're leveraged to the hilt. We would think that our counties are all in the same district. But what's really happening is the state is moving money around because, again, they know this. That's why they're rigging the elections. They're moving money around to try and keep everything balanced for now and hope that we're going to get through. And I mean, this makes total sense of why they let the illegal immigrants in. Because if you're familiar with the live local law that they passed in Florida, they planned on building all of this subsidized housing all over Florida, give the developers a whole ton of money, and then they would be subsidized housing, taxpayer funded housing. And eventually we'd all be living in it because those would be the only houses we'd be able to afford because they would just keep on raising the taxes, squeezing everybody else out till you're living in one of those subsidized houses too. Follow the money. That's all this is. Follow the money.
And they won't budge. They won't show it to you.
Yeah. That's further evidence that that's why they're rigging the elections. They want to make it look like, oh, no, we're dumb. We don't, or they'll make some stupid excuse. But in reality, it's to cover up a huge financial fraud.